to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. I am coming to you from my home via Zoom. The great education debate. Do we send our children, K through 12, back to school for in-person learning, or do we continue with distance learning? Or do we create a hybrid approach to teaching our children? The CDC on July 23, 2020, provided new guidelines for school districts to consider for reopening schools. So many issues to consider. What is safe and healthy school environment? Will children and staff comply with guidelines? What degree of risk is there for multi-generational households? How to bridge the inequities with distance learning? All of these issues and many more need to be considered. Today, I have three guests joining me to debate the issues and concerns. My first guest, Valerie Ervin, is a former two-term member of the Montgomery County Council. She served as council president and chaired the council's education committee for 7 years. Prior to her election to the council, Valerie was also elected to the Board of Education. Ms. Ervin also was the executive director of the Working Families Organization. Currently, Valerie, a very busy woman, is working for in Prince George's County for Prince George's County Public School System. My next guest is Marsha Suggs Smith. She is a trustee for the Board of Trustees for Montgomery College, another busy lady. Ms. Smith brings 30 years of experience as a teacher and team leader. From 1992 until 2008, Ms. Smith was a member of the National Education Association, serving on the executive committee and the board of directors. She will share her perspective as an educator. And my third guest is Karla Silvestre, also a busy lady. She was elected in 2018 as an at-large member for the Montgomery County Board of Education. And she brings her experience in teacher training, community outreach, and more importantly, educational policy. So ladies, thank you so much for coming or being on the show, not coming. And Valerie, I wanted to ask you, because you have such a broad experience. You have the political aspect of concern for the population, but you also bring the experience from being on the Board of Education and working with schools. How big of I think I'm saying the obvious, how big of an issue is this to tackle to figure out what to do for the upcoming school year?
Oh, it's a huge issue. I think all of your guests would agree. I will say that since being in Prince George's County Public Schools, what's been really interesting is the leadership that our fairly new superintendent has demonstrated by being one of the first urban school district leaders to determine that the children would not be going back into school buildings in the fall, and that we would commence distance learning as we did since March 13th of this year. And I say that because these are really, really tough decisions to make. So Montgomery County is the largest school district in Maryland, and Prince George's County is the second largest. However, there are some very interesting dynamics in place inside and outside the school buildings. So what we've learned during COVID is that, our communities are struggling. And in Prince George's County, there is a high degree of poverty. The school district is majority African-American and Latino. And many of those families are poor and struggling, very high farms rates in the schools. And so this is a bigger issue than just inside the school buildings. These are issues that are deeply embedded in these communities. And Prince George's County was a hot spot for COVID. It was probably had more COVID positives and more COVID related hospital stays than any other jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. So, Dr. Goldson had some very, very difficult decisions to make on behalf of the health, not only of the children and the teachers and the employees in the building, but the entire community.
And I can imagine that it's not an easy decision because, the issue of meals, and then the issue with the difficulty with the distant learning, at least with Latino families, with language barriers sometimes. How much can the parents help or not with the schoolwork and stuff? So it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. But Karla, what was the board's perspective with Montgomery County reaching the decision to do the distant learning for the fall semester?
Yeah, like you stated, it's a very difficult, unprecedented decision. I think first and foremost, health. The health of students, the staff, the community was front and center. And so we all understand that in-person learning is best for the majority of students. But at this time, in the current conditions, it just was not practicable to plan. And people need to plan. You know, it's important to be able to tell families who are making childcare decisions or working parents that are going back to work full-time decisions. It's important for them to know when this is going to happen. When are we going back to school in person, be it the hybrid model or the 5-day-a-week model? And so, you know, in conversations with our health experts, you know, they said, well, you know, we had announced that we were going to go online starting October 31st, and then we would slowly phase in a hybrid model. But when that would be was still up in the air and very much dependent on the COVID rates in our county and in the community. And so I think that
I would think that there's also the difficulty. I mean, they give you guidelines. The CDC gives you guidelines from K through 12, but the attitude of an 11th grader and a kindergartner are so vastly different that within the consideration of what you're going to do, I think you have to kind of consider your population as well. I mean, the younger children will struggle more, and the older children don't want to listen. You know, what do you do with a kid who doesn't want to wear a mask because dad said, look, they can't force you, don't wear a mask?
Yeah, but absolutely. I think it was a very well thought out plan, the hybrid model. But like I said, just because of the way the curves are going, even in the state of Maryland, but definitely throughout the country, it just did not seem that we were going to be able to pull off the hybrid model anytime soon. And so I think it's the best decision that we could have made, like I said, to allow people to plan, parents to plan, teachers to plan. At least I can, you know, if I have childcare issues, at least I know that I need to find a solution for the first half of the school year. So yeah, very complicated, but definitely first and foremost, health and safety is the #1 issue to guide our decisions at this time.
So Marsha, I wanted to ask you, as the educator of the group with a lot of experience in classroom experience and organizational experience, to me, you know, a lot of the conversation seems to start off with, we need to get the kids in school, the parents need the kids in school. Not a lot of conversation to the teachers saying, well, how do you feel about going back to school? And are you confident about going back to school? What, you know, having represented them in the past and such, what's your take?
Well, I did notice that most of the conversation, not only on the national level, but also on the state and local level, talked mainly about students, which most people do when they think about education. But they didn't begin to realize until lately that adults are there. And the adults are teachers, they're paraeducators, they're cafeteria workers. They also expand to building service workers, bus drivers. It's just a myriad of people that make a school go or a school district go. And the quality of the school is always important. So parents and those in the business community wanted to see those people who were at home, who had children, out into the workforce. So teachers and parents, students, and other community people with interests began to talk to each other. Teachers have known to always be activists. And I think we know from the Board of Education comments that they contacted their representatives at the Board of Education on the issues that concerned them in all counties, in all districts across the country. They also contacted their elected representatives, and you began to hear people talk about the health concerns that teachers and other staff who work in schools had. And there didn't seem to be a resolution to that problem. So as a result, here in Maryland, I can tell you that locally, Montgomery County Education Association have been constantly keeping their members attuned to what was going on, as well as SEIU, that represents the building supports, the support staff in the county. They also began to talk to people across the state, and the State Teachers Union talked to many of the representatives to find out what the issues were. Then the state association talked to the Baltimore Teachers Union. It was important to get their viewpoints as well. They began to talk to the superintendents associations, and everyone had the same concern. In fact, you might be able to see later on, if you've seen online, a picture of a staff person holding a sign that says, I'm going to paraphrase the language. This is someone, why are people meeting in Zoom rooms and Zoom meetings on the board or in the education community and expecting students and employees to go to work without a Zoom protections? Those are some of the issues that have come up. I can also tell you, all of us have lived and seen how health workers had to perform their duties diligently and with heart, but did not have the kind of protection that they needed to keep themselves safe. They knew that they were going to bring things home to their families, so they started to put procedures in place in their homes to make sure that their family is protected. The same thing is true of school employees. They know that they can be bringing something home to their families. And in my case, I happen to have asthma and allergies. That really scared me because I've done a lot over the years to keep that under control. And I saw students who had that same problem. So
those are really, really good points about the difficulty of these decisions. And Valerie, I know the other issue that is near and dear to your heart, because when you were on the council, you worked on getting meals in the summer for students that were out of school and had that need, and kids do get a lot of their food in school, and with the distant learning, there's also equity issues. How do you see us overcoming these issues now in this pandemic atmosphere?
Well, the equity issues are very large, and I can tell you the two other women on the panel can attest to that also in the county that we all live in, and that is that there are very many families struggling to put food on the table now. And they were struggling to put food on the table before the pandemic hit.
Sure.
But what this has done is it's shown a bright light on all the inequities that we all live with on a daily basis. So we have children who need to go to school to get breakfast and lunch, and in some cases to get dinner. So the school system that I work in now has really stepped up to the plate, and as of March the 15th has been offering food at different locations throughout the school system where families drive up in their car and then they're loaded up with food to take home. But, you know, on the subject of equity, let's just talk about the digital divide too, which has been huge. So if we're going to be teaching students via the internet, what happens if the student's family doesn't have internet connection? What happens if they don't have laptops? So the school system, and I know Montgomery County is very good at this as well, in Prince George's County, they immediately purchased 5,000 laptops and distributed them throughout the school system to students that didn't have them. So there's gonna have to be a lot more work done on this topic. I think that in 2020, we should not have a digital divide. I mean, I personally think that internet service should be free and available
Right.
to everyone. And so we have to really put all of our collective heads together about how to be in service to all of the students and to all of the families, no matter what their economic status is.
So the CDC issued new guidelines, and there's been a bit of controversy about them because it seems that they're not as stringent perhaps as they could be. And I took a look at them, and anyone in the audience, if you want to see it, it's cdc.gov /coronavirus, and then they have a bunch of actual great graphs and questionnaires to consider whether or not to send your child, if you have the option, back to school, and how to make that decision. But, you know, it's hand washing, social distancing. It's very, you know, standard kind of stuff that they give for the public. But how do you do that in the classrooms, and how do you ensure the mask wearing and all of that kind of stuff? Karla, what do you think, being on the board and having these guidelines? You know, do they help, or they're not enough to really give you, you know, a roadmap to getting the schools reopened?
Well, fortunately, because both of our counties are now online for the first semester, my hope is that we continue to abide by those, you know, maybe somewhat limited guidelines, and watch the curve flatten or go down along with vaccine. We're talking about 166,000 students going back to already overcrowded classrooms. With, you know, families maybe living in overcrowded apartments. So it has to be a combination of those guidelines, our community coming together to abide by them so that we can reduce the curve, and the mass distribution of a vaccine. So until that happens, I think it is very challenging to, you know, we could only put kids in a bus. So how are we going to transport this great number of students? That means that, you know, transportation was not going to be available for high school students. Well, that's a huge challenge for many of them.
Sure.
Or high school students were only going to be able to go to school 3 or 4 times in a 3-week period. So that's what it was going to take in order for us to have some kind of in-person model following the CDC guidelines. So it is extremely difficult to implement in reality. And that's why we are where we are today, with continuing to focus on a robust online model, and really, you know, doing a good assessment because of where our kids are come September. You know, how much did they lose in the spring? We know they already lose a lot in the summer, so that we can really relentlessly focus on getting the technology. We should have worked that out already in the spring and throughout the summer. When we come back in September, we should be doing a great assessment and really be relentless with supporting the families so that we can get our kids up to speed where they need to be by the end of the school. This cannot be a lost year.
Right.
We have worked too hard.
And so I was going to go to you, Marsha, because we are talking about K through 12,
Yes.
but, you know, education doesn't stop there. We have
Yes,
our
it does.
college students, and, you know, many of them are at 4-year institutions, but maybe they're not going back, or should they pay that huge tuition that some of the schools charge when they're just going to be doing in-learning? I mean, what do you think, and what are the options?
Well, at Montgomery College, I'll put on my trustee hat. We get a weekly report from the president as to what's going on. And when the pandemic began, we found that a lot of our students didn't have exactly what your other 2 guests had said. They didn't have a laptop. They didn't have a connection. They didn't have hotspots. They had phones, that they had, but it's pretty hard to do most of the lessons that you need to do on a phone. So we had students who were parents, students who were veterans, students who were seniors, older. And so we had a large range of people who didn't have access. Luckily, Montgomery College has a wonderful foundation, and the foundation was able to give laptops to many of our students. I think about 1,000 students received laptops. Comcast worked a great deal for some people who could pay a little bit, but I even know my son, who became a teacher this last year in special ed, he had the laptop, but he wasn't hooked up to Comcast, as many young people do now. They have a Roku or some other kind of way to get their entertainment. So the Comcast deal that went on was great for him, as well as MCPS giving him a hotspot so that he could use it. But that has been a severe problem. It's one of the reasons why equity issues are very important. I can say congratulations to Montgomery County Public Schools, and I know Prince George's did the same, by giving out hard copies of the lessons. So where the food distribution points were, parents were also, and guardians were able to pick up hard copies of the lessons as well. So
yeah, I mean, there's no reason to abandon the old ways, the old school, have the lessons in a hard copy, I think is a great idea. I wanted to ask you though, how is Montgomery College seeing students who are generally in a 4-year institution registering or wanting to register with MC to take classes through you guys?
Do you see a smile on my face? Our summer expectations were overwhelming. Our first and second part of the summer courses were over-enrolled from what we had expected. And we expect that to continue. I've talked to some college parents who are not ready to send their freshmen to a school in another state, and they don't know what the conditions are, but they can watch that map and see what the infection rate is. So they are taking a second look at Montgomery College, which they know is rated one of the top community colleges in the country. And
so I'm going to interrupt you real quick, and I'm going to ask you, because we're probably starting to run out of time, but
okay.
I'm going to ask you to give me the website for Montgomery College if someone's interested in doing that.
Yes, if they're interested in registering, they can just go to montgomerycollege.edu, and they can also get information on the effects on the coronavirus, like adding montgomerycollege.edu/coronavirus on it. One phone call they can call is 240-567-5000. And if they go to the website, there's a little box that says apply now. Just click on that box and start your application.
Well, that's great information. I know lots of parents are probably thinking out of the box for this upcoming semester. Valerie, what are some of the challenges that you see down the road? Because we have figured out, at least for Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and some other surrounding areas, but nationally, what do you think some of the challenges are going to be about spring semester?
Well, I was really, first of all, happy to hear about Montgomery College. I think this pandemic has opened up a lot of options for families and students, and Montgomery College is one of the best community colleges in the country. We know that, and we're so grateful for the trustees and all the fabulous people that work at Montgomery College. But I'm going to transition into the reason I wanted to start there is that this pandemic has opened our eyes to a lot of things. And one of them is that public education is supposed to be the great equalizer. And what we're seeing is that's not the case. And so at home here in Montgomery County and around the country, policymakers and teachers and administrators and elected board members are all going to have to hunker down and see that this is not working for a lot of children and families who are struggling economically. And we just have to do better.
And what do you think the spring's going to look like?
I personally, I'm praying that this is not the case, but I think this is going to be with us for a lot longer than we anticipate. So the fact that we just got ourselves to the point where we made these tough decisions about how we're going to reopen in the fall, to pivot in what they're talking about, pivot back in January in the winter. I just don't see how that's going to be possible at the height of the flu season. I think we'll still be in this through next spring. That's just my prediction. I hope I'm wrong.
So Karla, not to put you in the hot seat since you're currently on the board, but if parents or others concerned about what's happening with the school system and the plans or whatever, is there a forum for them to participate or become active?
Yes, we are getting unprecedented numbers of emails in our board inbox. I think people are very concerned about, just so much uncertainty right now. And so definitely they can write the Board of Education. We read all those emails and oftentimes bring a lot of those issues up during our board meetings. So in a public forum, we are bringing up the issues that are most important to parents. School communities are getting organized, right? We want to, there's this whole talk about the learning pods and making sure that we have equity and who gets to join those learning pods as school communities try to come together to support students while they're learning online. So it's going to be another year of transitions. We believe that we're putting out the best online model, but think about it. If you are a working parent with young children, that we're still figuring out how to best support, because you got to go to work. You're not available to help your first grader, as my sister has a first grader this year. You're not available to help them. You know how first graders are. If you need to sit with them. And so, we're going to record the lessons, but that still means that mom has to come home after a full day of work to sit through days worth of activities. So there's still a lot to be worked out, but I think that we have a good plan, but we need to come together as a community to make it work.
I imagine that we could do a whole show on recommendations for parents of what to do with since your kids are learning from home. But so I think we're out of time. There's so much more to consider and think about. But we'll have to save that for next time. So I wanted to send my thanks and a shout out to Elizabeth Garzone and the Be True Salon in Bethesda for my new look. I would like to thank my guests for being on the show and sharing their insights, and to my audience for watching. Please join me next week at the same time, or watch the show on our YouTube channel, Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow Show. And don't forget to subscribe, tag, and share. I am Mariana Cordier. Until next time.